Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndor and this is what's coming up on the show. We'll be unpacking what the Department of Education has been calling fake news and misreporting regarding their comprehensive sexuality education teaching for primary school learners. We'll also be taking a look at World TV Day that happened this past week. Of course, our regular features, we'll be hoping to try and get through to Zimbabwe, but if we don't, we'll do that next week. And of course, we'll also be taking you back in history a little bit later on in the show. Don't forget you can engage with us on social media using hashtag SABC Media Monitor. We'd love to hear from you about what you see on the show. But before we unpack these stories, let's take a look at what's on the front pages of the Sunday newspapers this morning. Let's start with the Sunday Times that has EFF leader Julius Malema on the front page. The story says that Malema personally benefited from millions of rand from VBS Bank, and this was channeled through a company that exposed as his own slush fund. The City Press also has Malema as its lead story, only here the paper talks about what appears to be a rebellion in his own party after the student wing made it clear that they would fight his plan to shut down the student command and create a women's wing. The Sunday Independent, well, the front page there talks about accusations. The Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has launched a crusade against the black executives after he allegedly stalled the appointment of the Transnet CEO for months because he did not approve of the shortlisted candidates. The Sunday Tribune is also running with this story, describing Minister Gordhan's anti-black crusade. The paper says that Gordhan imposed Derator on Eskom and he wants a female CEO to take over at Transnet despite 3 candidates having already been put forward, all male. And the Weekend Argus, well, that's the same story, isn't it? The front page of the Weekend Argus on Sunday, accusations of being anti-black were heightened this past week as Eskom appointed Andre Derator as its new CEO despite not having an engineering background. And the Sunday World is leading with a story regarding 2 of the SABC's long-running and flagship television dramas, Generations and Isidingo. Apparently, in a bid to save costs, Isidingo has been canned, and Generations, well, they're in a deadlock at the moment as producers dig in their heels over budgets. Many stars look like they'll be losing their jobs. Alright, so that's a look at the papers. Let's take a look also what's trending on social media this morning on Twitter. And as you can see, these are the top 5 trends. This was a short while ago and it always tends to change. But the one that really grabbed my attention is this one, Brie. We're going to talk about that in a short while because we may be interrupted during the course of this morning. This is a shot of downtown Johannesburg and the Bank of Lisbon building, and in a short while this is going to be imploded. This building is going to collapse literally, and you'll remember this building was declared unsafe. A fire broke out there and firefighters lost their lives, and the city decided that the best thing actually was to destroy the building. Nozintombi Mia is there and she'll be covering the story for us, and let's listen to see if they are ready. It was scheduled for 9, but it could happen at 9:30. All right, so we're monitoring those pictures, and at any moment in time we'll just cross back there and see if this building goes down. So that's downtown Johannesburg at the moment, and the Bank of Lisbon building scheduled to have a controlled implosion And yeah, you'll remember, as I said, that there we go, and that is the implosion. Nozintombi Mia is live there. Let's listen to her. All right, so there you have it. The Bank of Lisbon building is no more, and this was a carefully controlled implosion, the collapsing of this building. The buildings around the area were evacuated. As many as 2,000 people were taken out of the area for safety, and it has now come down. It was declared unsafe. This after a fire broke out in the building, killing, I think it was 5 firefighters at the time, and the city decided that this building actually just isn't fit for purpose, and the next step was to do what we're seeing here this morning, to destroy the building, and a new and safer one will be put in its place. So you've just watched live, and it's not something you see often, the controlled implosion of a building downtown Johannesburg. We're hoping to cross to Nozintombi Mia, who is on the ground there watching these pictures that you're seeing, but I can only imagine that the atmosphere there is quite a sight and something to experience, but obviously one has to be careful about the dust that you're seeing. So let's go. All right, okay. We're going to leave it there for the time being, but we may cross back to them just to get a sense of what's happened post that dramatic implosion. All right, okay, so what we were talking about just before was what was trending on social media, and I want to go back there because it's really, really interesting. These are the top 5 trends that I was talking about, but the one that really grabbed my attention is this one, number 2, which says Brie. And I don't know if you're superstitious or not, but apparently a cat drove a taxi from Bree Street to Fourways. So I don't know if you believe in all of that. So people have been posting on social media about this cat that drove a taxi from Bree Street to Fourways. Do you know what? We are superstitious but in nature as black people, but I think this is probably a step too far. I don't know what your thoughts are, but a lot of people having fun with it this morning. A cat driving a taxi from Bree Street to Fourways. Yeah, okay. All right, so there you go. That's the number 2 trend. And this is started yesterday, so it's something quite popular. People have been sharing their thoughts on this one in particular. All right, there's so much to get through on the show this morning, and helping us make sense of these stories are my guest editors, Professor Gilbert Mutsatebe, Associate Professor at the Department of Journalism, Film and Television, and CEO at Frey Intermedia, Paula Frey, a guest again. A very good morning to both of you. Give us a wave. Go on. There we go. We'll be chatting to them in a short while. Thanks so much indeed for joining us on Media Monitor. First story, Fake news and false media reports are misleading and causing harm to the debate on comprehensive sexual education. That's the CSE section of the school's live orientation curriculum. This is according to a statement released by the Department of Basic Education this past Sunday. Now, the statement noted the impact that fake news has had on the debate around the issue of CSE, saying that false reporting by some media organizations and fake news have created unnecessary confusion and anxiety amongst parents. Well, to tell us a little bit more about what's been going on and what the department is most aggrieved about, I'm joined by the department's spokesperson, Elijah Mtlanga. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, Elijah. Always good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
But this seems to be a story that just keeps on going. I know you've done quite a bit of media to try and correct this, but take us through what has got us here? What's been going on?
Yeah, Peter, thanks very much. You know, what happened was that the department 5 years ago embarked on a pilot to test the use of a new tool for teaching life orientation, especially the component that's got to do with the comprehensive sexuality education. So we're doing that pilot, and for some reason the news broke that the department was going to be implementing a new curriculum next year, and that curriculum was going to teach young people in grade 4 masturbation and anal sex and all of those things. And it's something that was completely untrue. And it took us by surprise as well, because we knew that it wasn't in any of the documents of the department, but for some reason that seemed to be doing the rounds. And the news just kept going that it was going to be implemented in 2020. And we're wondering, where is that coming from? Right. Because nothing can be implemented without us saying so. So it really was baffling to read everywhere else that there was something like that happening.
All right, we're going to deal with the mainstream media just now, but there does seem to be a number of websites that have been publishing stories to this effect. Do you get a sense that this is just a misinterpretation of your statements, or is it deliberate? What do you think?
No, we conducted a media analysis. We took all the articles, links and everything, and we went through it carefully. And we found that at the core of it, there is a coordinated attempt at misleading the public about certain things. People go so far as to creating images, putting our logos and making it look as though it's real and genuine from the department with false information. And unfortunately, people believe that, because as soon as you put a coat of arms on anything, people think it's the government talking, even when we have not officially said anything. And over and above that, there were other images as well that were created. And all photo that we had seen 3 years ago, now it had new information on it saying, this is in a book to be used for grade 4 learners in 2020, which is not true. And from there were others as well. And you could see that at the core of the complaints and outrage from members of the public, there was this belief that indeed these images were telling the truth.
So this is actually fake news then? I mean, if it's deliberate and targeted, do you know why?
Well, we don't know. We don't know why, but we think that fake news is a big business now. The more people click on it, the more money people make, those that are producing fake news. So it seems now, as communicators, we'll also have to budget to fight off fake news in everything that we do. I mean, yesterday I was reading a statement released by the Department of Transport in which they were also clarifying something. Somebody reported somewhere that they were going to be reducing the speed limit on the roads and reducing the alcohol limit on alcohol. The department had to come out and say, no, we are not doing that. We said we would consider extraordinary measures that will reduce the road carnage.
Let's talk then about the definition, because you were quite concerned, and this is mainstream media now. And not calling it by its name, and that's helping with the confusion.
In fact, it happens on many occasions. For example, even with the homeschooling thing, people keep calling it homeschooling, but the policy calls it home education. So we always have to, we always have to correct people. Even on this one, it's comprehensive sexuality education, not sex education. Because when you say sex education, you imply that we teach kids how to have sex, which is not what we are doing. We talk about sexuality education, which involves a much broader view at how people behave and how they choose to identify themselves. So if you call it by its right name, we are more likely to report accurately, because then you will be forced to find the content from the department and what the department is saying about it. But if you say sex education, you are more likely to follow what's on Google and fake news and then go a wrong direction.
Right, okay.
And
finally, what are the facts then? What is the story?
The facts are that there's no new curriculum that we're introducing in 2020. All that we're doing is to pilot scripted lesson plans which we have created for our teachers. So there's no need for outrage. We have also consulted parents in the areas where the pilot is taking place. So anything, if anything at all, people need to talk to us, including the media, because someone reported that in the Mercury, they said during the week that the department, the minister said you could opt out. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
If you don't understand, if you think you understand something, don't commit it in writing. Rather ask, get confirmation. We'll be able to help you. Because if you don't do that, then you're more likely to mislead your readers and the public.
Right. Elijah, thanks so much indeed for coming through and pointing this out. We'll continue to discuss all of this misreporting and fake news a little bit more. But thanks so much indeed for coming through.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
So that was the spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education, Elijah Matlanga. All right, so we're going to go back to Bree Street, in fact, downtown Johannesburg, where the Bank of Lisbon building has come down in a puff of smoke, Nozintombi Mia.
Well, Peter, as you saw those absolutely incredible pictures of the Bank of Lisbon building coming down, it took about 30 seconds, and that building literally was demolished in a massive puff of smoke. Where we were standing was literally right at the base of corner Pritchard and Pixley Sime Street. So you could literally see as the cloud of smoke just came straight towards us. Absolutely incredible visuals. Right now we're here at the Library Gardens at the viewing site where spectators could get an opportunity to see the bank come down. And you'll recall from about 6 o'clock, 6:30 this morning, a lot of the residents that live in the buildings around the Bank of Lisbon building were evacuated out for safety concerns. And we speak to some of the students. You'll know that the building right opposite it is a student accommodation building. And we speak to some of the students that were there. Thank you so much, Stella. Stella, you're one of the students that was evacuated this morning. Just tell me, what did they tell you and what was the process this morning?
As far as I was concerned, the building was going down and I had to leave my room, and knowing my lazy self, I couldn't wake up so early. But the entire experience was actually really great, and was absolutely incredible.
And you were standing this side here by Library Gardens. How did you feel when you saw this building that you see every day, when you wake up?
It was quite scary because I was trying to record it, and I literally froze, and I pressed pause and I turned around. But it was just like a literally great experience.
Great experience. Young lady, you also were standing right...
awesome! Like the building just went boom, 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 boom! And the way it down the house, this was awesome! Much respect to those guys, like that building, it was...
And you, young man, you were also...
Yeah, I was also here. It was the sound, the bombing sound. It was incredible. Yeah. Like, I really enjoyed it. Yes.
And you, sir, you were also here.
It was awesome to see something like that happening. It was my first time.
Okay, we have quite a number of people quite excited to tell us about the experience. You, sir, what was your experience of seeing the building coming down?
Well, it was nice for the first time to see such a big building falling like this, you know. Yeah, first time in Joburg in South Africa ever since I was born to see this.
And how did that make you feel? I mean, this is obviously a building where 3 firefighters lost their lives as a result of trying to stab out a fire. What were your thoughts? I'm sure you must have had mixed emotions.
Well, it's sad when we think about those people who lost their life in that building. But anyway, there's nothing much we can say. It had happened and it's over, but now that building is gone. Yes. But it's very scary, eh?
Yes, certainly.
I'm also frightened. You know, I don't know if I'm going to make it to sleep tonight, eh?
You also still quite
it was amazing because this building, they finished maybe 3 years to building it. But to damage it, almost maybe 2 seconds, the building, it was gone. And I was very scared. But now I'm okay because...
Why were you scared?
you know, this dust and the way this, I don't know, like a bomb, just something that's coming like a boom. And it's the first time on my life to see this thing happen on my life. Yeah, but now I'm okay. I'm very happy because these people, they managed to take out everything there because lots of too much people on that building.
Thank you so much, Peter. As you can see, mixed emotions, high emotions from the spectators here who all saw the Bank of Lisbon controlled explosion this morning. It was quite prompt, 3 minutes after 9 o'clock. The sirens were sounded, and the sirens were obviously warning all people that this building was coming down. And it came down literally within 30 seconds. It came down in a massive cloud of smoke, debris and concrete. Peter.
Nozintombi Mia, our reporter on the ground, capturing the sights, the sounds and the atmosphere. Thanks so much indeed. So, the Bank of Lisbon building is no more, and we wait to see what will replace it. As the skyline of Johannesburg, I have a feeling we'll see some changes over time. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we continue with Media Monitor.
Alicia, how old are you?
I'm 10.
You are 10 and you are an author.
Yes. Well, my mom was the one who inspired me to write this book. Nothing is impossible.
Got him onto a 150, started racing, and within 8 months he was bringing home trophies.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. You young man are going places.
It's one of the most cultivated regions in terms of content in the.
Our job as the SA Today team doesn't simply start when the cameras start to roll. We also work tirelessly behind the scenes to keep you up to date with stories of the day.
What have you established as an organization, or rather as an association, regarding this WhatsApp group Stokvel?
If you look at the WhatsApp Stokvels, people join irrespective of whether they know each other or not. So the person joining is faceless. The one recruiting is also faceless. It's a disaster.
Watch SA Today every day from 3 p.m.
Right, welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, fake news and false media reports are misleading and cause harm to the debate, and various issues about news, whatever it may be. And just before the break, we saw, of course, how that was affecting the comprehensive sexual education, the part of the life orientation program of the Department of Education. But sadly, also in that conversation, we found out that misreporting was contributing to that. So I'm going to ask my guest editors, thanks very much for joining us, welcome again, to take us through your thoughts about this whole misreporting, because fake news has an agenda and they've got whatever it is outcome that they're looking for. But as journalists, we have to report the facts, and for some reason this doesn't always quite happen. And I just wonder, Prof. Gilbert, let me start with you. What do you make of the misreporting? I mean, we've had Judge Raymond Zondo say things, Mogoeng, Chief Justice say, take issue with reporters. What do you think is going wrong?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Peter. Well, I mean, this type of reporting is a big problem, especially at the moment, because at some stages, journalists, we need to go back to the drawing board and say, I mean, like the rule of thumb, if you're not sure of something, leave it out. Yeah. But we also have, to make sure that we have proper gatekeeping in place to make sure that we verify the facts, and the facts are thoroughly checked before we release the story to the public. But in addition, some journalists are also known to have the tendency to create hype, either positive or negative, around certain issue, and that sometimes become a problem. And I think we need to go back to beat reporting, whereby you need to specialize in a particular area so that you are thoroughly acquainted with the facts, and you are able to put the context and to report properly in a particular story, and also use relevant sources of information to complement what you are putting across. So I think that is absolutely important. Otherwise, we risk creating misinformation such as this. And once we put that across, it is very, very difficult, to correct. We always talk about retraction, but in actual sense, you cannot retract what is already. That's why we sometimes talk about the remedies in terms of trying to do a correction, apologize, but that is actually a mitigation. You cannot really retract what has already gone out.
All right, so Paula, you worked at the Star for many years, just down the road from the Bank of Lisbon building. What's different from when you were a reporter then to what's being done now? What's shifted, do you think, that we're seeing these kinds of misreporting? Because I want to believe that it's not deliberate.
I mean, it's true that in some ways that we need better basic education, or better basics in terms of journalism. But I think what we also often underestimate is the level of skills that journalists need now in order to navigate a world that is quite often driven by the speed of social media, right? So I watched the story about the comprehensive sexuality education unfolding on social media, and one of the things that we have to recognize is the speed at which that goes viral really puts pressures on journalists to be able to produce stories really quickly. And so we have two problems. We have the speed at which the story unfolds, but we also have a lack of capacity to be able to verify what is real and what is fake. And so something as simple as at one stage there were supposedly pictures that people were sharing on social media around the so-called sex curriculum that were completely fake, but you wonder whether journalists have the skills to be able to very quickly check whether those pictures are real or not. But just the basics of going back to the source and going back to the Department of Education and saying, is this true? Are you doing this? Etc. And what we're finding is that the speed of social media very often forces journalists to go to publication before they've done basic checks, before they've done more beyond single source journalism. And so we get the kind of stories that are horrific, like Twitter says, or people on Twitter say, when in fact that's not journalism at all.
Do you think that there's, before you used to have beat reporters and they specialize in a certain area, and I find nowadays reporters do everything, and maybe that's contributing. I mean, I saw the other day a reporter write something like the National Prosecuting Authority granted bail to someone. And, that's a simple legal issue, but clearly they didn't quite understand how it works.
Yes, it's a big problem, and obviously that's bound to happen. I mean, if you are not specialized in a particular area. But we do understand the pressures within the newsrooms, that, we are working against the clock. And then we are rushing, to put the stories through. However, that does not mean that we must, ignore the basic rules. And also that calls, bring to the fore the issue of media literacy on part of the audience themselves, which means audience must now, try to be media literate in such a way that they are quickly able to spot a fake story. Because usually when coming to fake stories, you will see that the writing is often shallow, and even there is no particular structure, and often there's also a lot of mistakes because there are no proper mechanism, checking mechanism in place. So if you have a keen eye, you are able to spot those, and you can easily see that, this is no longer, although it's also becoming very difficult, like we pointed on, out earlier on. Due to advancement in technology, they are able to manipulate quite a lot of things in such a way that it becomes believable. And I know for a fact that in South Africa we had for some time had a problem with what is widely referred to as juniorization of the newsroom, whereby more experienced and thorough journalists live for greener pastures somewhere. So that itself also calls upon newsroom managers, to look at that very, very carefully and try to come up with some sort of incentives for good journalists to stay in our newsrooms.
Yeah, and I, perhaps as we start to wrap this up, there is a lot of pressure. I mean, the newsroom of 1995 is probably 3 times bigger than the newsroom now. Well, so, and then they didn't have a digital platform to worry about, Twitter to worry about, so that there's less journalists doing much more, and I guess this is part of what contributes to this.
Not only are there fewer journalists, but they also, where are the editors, where are the sub-editors? If you're saying that the reporter said that the MPA granted bail, someone should have spotted that up the hierarchy and said, hang on a second, this is wrong. So we put a lot of pressure on journalists. But I think that in this particular case, we also need to be asking, what is the responsibilities of editors to make sure that the kind of journalism that they end up publishing is verified, is credible, and has integrity?
All right, okay. We'll have these debates ongoing, which is good and important, because I think we need to keep on thinking about them and trying to find ways to solve these challenges. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll start talking about World Television Day, which happened in 1976 in South Africa. How has that contributed to information, entertainment, and education? Find out after this.
See that again. I literally feel like a kid in a candy store.
From celebrities, politicians, we get to mingle with the who's who of Johannesburg.
Part of the Duzi to Sunny experience brings you here to the highest part in Africa, and you get to see these rolling hills that are behind me.
As Trends Travel, we travel far and wide to find you hidden gems.
On Economics Unbound, we unpack everything from corruption.
On the day he resigned, he was not aware of any fraud. Of course, they called it accounting irregularities. We've always called it fraud.
To the effect global activities have on different economies around the world.
This drone attack seems to be the single worst sudden disruption ever in the world oil market. But what does all of this mean for South Africa and the rest of the world?
The last thing we need is a spike in oil prices and a disruption in oil supply. We will have a repeat of the recession of the 70s, which is really very dire for the global economy.
Join Tandeka and Nana on Economics Unbound, Thursdays at 9 p.m.
Now, this past week, the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, celebrated World Television Day, saying that TV has become an integral part of life, accounting for 80% of all consumer internet traffic. Now, the day recognizes the medium as a major source of news, information, and education and entertainment. Television was introduced in South Africa in 1976, and whilst radio is still the most popular media, television has grown steadily in access and importance. Well, let's chat now to our guest editors about television, particularly in South Africa, and the role that it's played over the years. Prof, let me start with you. Why did television only kick off in 1976 in South Africa? That's a bit late compared to the rest of the world.
Yes, we were a latecomer in terms of television, but that was precisely because there was apprehension on part of the then government. There was a fear that television, with its power to influence, mobilize, would then, lead people to revolt against the then government, because it was an unjust government. So that's why it was so late. And then until such time that they appointed a commission to look at the feasibility of introducing television. And the fear was only allayed by the commission when it pointed out that you have to introduce television because with technological development, this is unavoidable. People will still see images from other parts of the world, and then when you will have no control of that. So it's better you introduce it here so that we can have control of what is being put across.
That's fascinating bit of history, isn't it, Paula? But it did come. And sadly, initially it was controlled, particularly the news. But its influence was certainly felt. I know that traffic patterns changed at some point when TV soaps were introduced. People were rushing home to catch some of these. But take us through, over the years, just how much influence television has had, particularly here at home.
So television is an incredibly impactful platform, right? I mean, as you were saying, visually there's great impact. I mean, you see things and you hear things. And so not only has the hardware changed over the years, I mean, I can remember our first television, black and white, it's kind of really big, really bulky. But we've gone on to kind of flat screen televisions, big televisions, high definition television, and so the hardware has also changed in many ways. The kinds of things that we can consume on the platform. But in terms of television and our lives, I mean, in South Africa, television has played an incredible role in terms of education, edutainment. I think Soul City series, for example, is the benchmark globally in social behavior change communication, and that is a South African product. But also you look at things like Sesame Street, so huge impact in terms of society. It has huge cultural impact on society.
But propaganda as well, wasn't it? And that's what the SABC was known for at that time. And if it wasn't on the main news, and whatever was on the main news, that's all that happened in the country at the time. And so a lot of people genuinely didn't know as much as they should have about what was happening around them.
Yes. Television actually played a major role. But even today, for most people, television remains the most credible source of news. Like it was mentioned earlier, people believe more of what they see. So television brings all those faculties, because it brings the faculties of three institutions, namely the cinema, and then news and feature magazines from the print culture, as well as broadcasting. So it is an immensely powerful medium, and that's why it has to be celebrated. And it played a major role across the world for many, many years. And I remember there was a stage where it was on its golden age, where it was so popular. And as we know today, it's a household medium, and it's responsible for millions of decisions that are taken by people across the world on a daily basis. So it's an incredibly powerful medium that
Very
has to be celebrated.
Even now. I mean, if you're looking at the television debates that are taking place in the United States, the impeachment inquiry, plus also the Democrats. And in the UK, same story. People vote based on what they hear and see on TV. But it has changed a lot. Before you had this box on top of inside a cabinet, actually. It wasn't even on top of a table. And now, if you've got a smartphone, you have access to vision. So I know we had a chat earlier in the year. Should we still be calling it television or video vision?
So in South Africa, access to the internet is around just over 50%. And even people who have access to the internet don't have the extent of access that allows them to stream. So while streaming is becoming increasingly popular, and for example, if something happens in Parliament and people are at the office, they're not likely to go to a television set. They're likely to go to their computer and watch SABC online and see what what's happening in Parliament. So you're right. The way we actually consume television has changed. But television is still the greatest producer of video. And so a lot of the content we see in terms of video comes from television and is being produced for television. You know, when we were talking about propaganda, it really kind of illustrates why SABC as a public broadcaster is so important, because the reality is that majority of South Africans are getting their news, their primary news from the SABC.
So when we look in its totality, because I remember there were debates about how much television people should watch and not watch, and that they've stopped reading. Has it been, and it's probably unfair to ask you this, but has it been more beneficial than it has been harmful? Or what's your take generally when we look at it all in its totality? Let's start with you, Prof.
Well, in my view, it has been more beneficial, you know, than being harmful. Yeah, for me, reason that it has been able to educate, to inform and entertain at the same time. Of course, there has always been, critics who will argue that, television is inciting people to do wrong things, bring about unpalatable behavioral patterns, etc., etc. But if you look at the overall picture, you will realize that this is a potent medium that has made huge contribution and continues to do so. Like, for example, what has been said, even if you look at the content that is now being populated on multiple platforms that we have online, the televisuality itself, comes from television. That influence is still there even for those particular videos that we see. The aesthetics are that of television, so it is there to stay.
I mean, it certainly has opened the world. Without television, we'd never have seen Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. I mean, it would have just been things we imagine. And I guess that's the part of the magic of it, is that it's opened up the whole world.
We would not have seen the Lisbon building fall down in real time.
Exactly. All right. So what's the future then? What's the next chapter, do you think, for television or video vision?
Well, we're beginning to see that already, right? I mean, there's a decrease in appointment television, so people coming to watch programs at specific time and actually kind of consuming television more at their own convenience. So a number of people are actually going to be watching this program, not now, but later on your platform, on your YouTube platform, on your YouTube channel. We're beginning to see people consuming television as part of a holistic diet of media. So they're consuming it while engaging in conversation on social media. And so we're seeing a multi-platform way of actually consuming information.
All right, okay. That's where we're going to leave this discussion, World Television Day, and it certainly has impacted every single person's life and continues to do so, and we'll see what the next chapters have. All right, so we're going to take another quick break, and in fact, do we take a break or do we go back in history now? What do you want to do? Let's take a break, and then after that we'll take you back in history to the mid-1990s. Something very special was happening, led by Desmond Tutu. What was that? In fact, let's do that right now. Yeah, we go back to, and just to let you know, the reason that we do this feature every week is because a whole generation of South Africans missed many of the stories which history was recorded at the time. And today we take you back to 1995, where the Cabinet announced the names of those people to serve on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was led by Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. Now, the TRC was set up to deal with the atrocities of the past and guide South Africa on a path of reconciliation. This is how the SABC told the news story at the time.
Joining us, the Cabinet has announced the names of the appointees to serve on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The 17-member panel will be headed by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, with Justice in Transitions Dr. Alex Pereyne as Vice-Chairman.
The full list of appointees is Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Dr. Alex Pereyne, Ms. Mary Burton, Advocate Christa Yar, Reverend Bongani Finker, Ms. Sisi Kampepe, Mr. Richard Lester, Mr. Wynand Malon, Ms. Shlangiwe Mkhize, the Reverend Kaya Mgojo, Mr. Dumisa Nsabenza, Dr. Wendy Orr, Advocate Denzel Potgieter, Dr. Mapule Ramashala, Dr. Faisal Randera, Dr. Yasmin Suka, and Ms. Glenda Volskot. Announcing the Cabinet's decision in Pretoria this afternoon, Cabinet Secretary Professor Jakes Gerwel said two of the members, Reverend Mgojo and Advocate Potgieter, had not been on the original shortlist of 25 nominees. He said they'd been appointed so the Commission could better reflect the variety of South African society.
The Cabinet echoed the often expressed sentiments of the President and the invocations contained in the post-amble of the Constitution and the preamble to this Act, namely that the work of the Commission is informed and directed by the need for understanding and not for vengeance, for reparation, not for retaliation, for Ubuntu, not for victimization.
The appointments will be formalized by a proclamation in the Government Gazette within the next few days.
They need to step up and take responsibility.
He believes that these banks were actually enablers of state capture.
I met senior directors of HSBC and Standard Chartered. I found a great reluctance from both of them.
Reverend Frank Chikane was very actively involved in calling out state capture.
The Guptas will tell you, if you don't do what we want by Wednesday, you won't be a Director General.
The murder case has implicated some senior public servants. Tell us more.
Indeed, this case has gained more traction as we see after an auditor has testified on the financial flows between Siemens and Bagili.
Department of Community Safety, Security and Liaison and the Department of Health had promised that it will strengthen security in all hospitals in the province. That has not yielded any positive results.
Alicia, how old are you?
I'm 10.
You are 10 and you are an author.
Yes. Well, my mom was the one who inspired me to write this book. Nothing is impossible.
Got him onto a 150, started racing, and within 8 months he was bringing home trophies.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. You young man are going places.
It's one of the most cultivated regions in terms of content and in
Right, welcome back. Let's focus a little bit now on what's in the newspapers here at home, and our guest editors are going to take us through some of those stories. Okay, let me start with you, Paula. So what captured your imagination on the newspapers? I mean, there's two, I think, big ones for me. Julius Malema on the one hand and Praveen Gordhan on the other. But did anything else grab your attention?
It was quite interesting that all of the independent newspapers were carrying more or less the same front page. And be nice to, but that, having said that, I thought what was really nice about this week's papers is that across the different groups there were different stories. Right, you know, right. Sometimes you open up the newspapers and they all have similar stories. Actually, what I really liked inside the Sunday Times particularly were the features, and particularly looking at some of the gender-based violence stories that they have done today. I think as we come up to 16 days of activism, it's really important that the media not only covers those stories but holds government to account in order to make sure that it's being taken seriously and that it's not just simply, again, 16 days of activism and people talking, but actually holding government to account to make things happen.
All right, so you're an editor now sitting in a newsroom. How do we tell these stories so that it's not the same thing over and over again?
I mean, you know, part of the problem is that gender-based violence in South Africa is so pervasive, and so it does feel like this is a perennial story. Every year we write how bad it is, etc. And I think it's really important for editors to be able to step back and to give, you know, it's one thing to tell us what everyone's talking about and speaking about, but I think also editors have some responsibilities to be able to lead the debate and to be able to open us up to new ways of thinking, to new opportunities to be able to resolve these issues. And so simply to repeat the same story is just not acceptable. They really do need to think differently about how we tell these stories.
All right, Prof. Gilbert, anything grab your attention?
Yeah, very interesting headlines indeed. And what is clear is that the VBS story is a media frenzy that is going to be with us for a very, very long time as information keeps on coming to the fore. But also the Peven story was also interesting in terms of what we see coming across. I mean, particularly in relation to the workplace transformation agenda and how that debilitate the process. Bearing in mind, of course, in my view, I think basically if a person is fit for the job and can do the job and is qualified, then
But in a country like South Africa, 25 years later, can you afford not to find competent black people, given the expectations that people have?
Yeah, that's something that is worrying. And then I think if you look at the comments that we have seen both in Twitter and other platforms, and that is the issue that people are facing to say that. But then we know that the transformation has been slow but steady. Because I think the government itself has over the years proven its commitment to transformation, as we have seen, especially in government. We know that it's doing very well with leadership positions now being occupied by but when coming to other sectors. So this is one of the cases where you find that this issue is again coming to the fore, where you are having a parastatal, and then you end up not finding, I don't know what was the procedure, but this story, I think it will be a story that is going to evolve as there will be more follow-up story on this to unpack what really transpired.
All right, so I want you guys to take me through this, because if I'm a reader, every week I seem to see a story about Pravin Gordhan, and it's always negative. I haven't seen one story. Is he really that bad? Or can we start to think that maybe there's an agenda against him? What's your take on it? Because as a poor reader, I have to make up my mind about my government, about my leaders, and all these stories constantly coming up. He often says that there will be a fight back. Could that be a narrative, or is it genuinely a crusade against black executives? And he's a black man.
I mean, there certainly were stories in the newspapers that also suggested that up to 27 black executives were approached in order to apply for the ESCOM job. And some of the state-owned enterprises have proved to be poison chalices for senior executives. And these are people that have many options, quite frankly, at the moment. I think South Africa has major economic challenges. I think that the government has major challenges. South Africa collectively has major challenges. And I think what often is lacking in the stories about what's happening is a nuance, right? It's either all bad or it's all good, or there's an agenda against people and there's no agenda against people. And I think it would be really good to be able to see journalists be able to give us the big picture and also kind of show that there is some nuance. I'm sure that there are people that don't like Pravin Gordhan out there, but I'm also sure that there are people who do like what he's doing and feel that what he's doing is necessary. And it'd be nice to see stories that actually capture that balance.
All right, so City Press, let's take a look at that front cover now. And this one's going on about a rebellion inside the EFF. And I remember, and I go back to Andile Mkritama, I think it was the first conference, where he was quite upset with the way that the voting happened, and he almost suggested that this was a dictatorship. Is it reasonable to think that after all this time that there might be some people saying, hang on a minute, let's take charge of this party and not allow these top six to carry on ad infinitum?
Yeah, interesting indeed, because I think the nature of politics is in such a way that the grass can always grow underneath your feet, at any time,
Yeah.
So you will not remain popular forever, or with supporters, or members of the party. And if you look back into history, you'll find more or less, a similar pattern.
Yeah.
So something like this, can be expected for any party or any leader. This uprisings amongst followers or party members at any given time. Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Interesting stories. I'm sure readers will be able to work it out for themselves. Paula Frey and Professor Gilbert Motsa-Tebe, thank you so much indeed for joining us and being great guest editors for us on the program. For you at home, thanks so much indeed for joining us. You've been watching Media Monitor. We discussed all the top stories, including the implosion of a building. You saw it live right here on the program. Join us again for more of the same next week. Perhaps not a building blowing up, but no doubt some politician will probably be on the front pages. So have a great week in the meantime, everybody. Bye-bye.